Hello, everybody. I'm Jax James, NORML State Policy Manager, joined today with Morgan Fox, who is working on our federal policy up in D.C. As I'm sure you guys have been tuned into, there has been a lot going on at the federal level, so I feel really lucky and happy to have Morgan with us today. Thanks for squeezing us into your schedule, Morgan. You know, we've always got a lot of people in the comments asking what's going on at the federal level, so very happy to have you today. Since your time is short, and I know people probably want to get in a few questions, I'm just going to turn it over to you straight away to give us an update about what's going on at the federal level. You're muted. How do I unmute you?
There we go. Sorry. Well, thanks for having me again. We had some really big news yesterday. After weeks, if not months, of working with House leadership, as well as asking our NORML members to put pressure on their members of Congress in order to bring the more vote for a floor vote, one was finally noticed yesterday. So there's going to be a House Rules Committee hearing on that bill on Monday, and then we are looking at a potential vote on that on either Thursday or Friday. This is a really big deal. It will only be the second time in more than 50 years that either chamber of Congress has voted on a bill to end federal prohibition. It passed in 2020, and we expect it to pass again next week. Which will be really important, not only just in terms of maintaining momentum for comprehensive cannabis policy reform that's focused on restorative justice, but also in being able to find out where federal lawmakers stand on this issue leading into the midterm elections, as opposed to after them, as was the case in 2020. So I think that this will be really useful for voters, as well as for advocates and lobbyists who are trying to push comprehensive cannabis policy reform, to gain a lot of intel and figure out where we need to be putting our pressure in a much more concrete form than we have previously. And, like the saying goes, when it rains, it pours. While myself and everyone else was busy hustling to do things with the MORE Act, the Senate decided to introduce, and within a matter of 30 seconds, unanimously consent to approving the Cannabidiol and Marijuana Research Expansion Act, which is a limited but still positive research bill that provides for not only the licensing of additional federally approved providers and producers for cannabis for research purposes, but also removes several other barriers to research that currently exist under federal law. So while it's not the best research bill out there, it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I think also indicates that the Senate is moving in the right direction, and will be much more likely to have hearings and potentially votes on both incremental and comprehensive bills as we move forward, especially after Senate Majority Leader Schumer introduces the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, which supposedly will happen next month. It's another reason why we're excited about the MORE Act coming up for a vote, because having the House approve for the second time a bill to remove cannabis from the Schedule of Controlled Substances and provide relief for the communities that have been most impacted by prohibition will be very useful in holding Schumer's feet to the fire when it comes to sticking to a timeline to actually introduce this legislation. And until we have legislation to actually look at and talk about, we can't really get meetings with members of the Senate that are actually substantive, and we certainly can't hold hearings. So there's still a lot of work to do. I don't take anything for granted when it comes to these sort of things. So, I and my colleagues in the Marijuana Justice Coalition and elsewhere are going to continue pounding the pavement in Congress to make sure that we have the votes to actually get more across the finish line in the lower chamber. And I would encourage everybody out there to contact your lawmakers as well and make sure that they vote yes on this bill next week.
Right, so if everyone goes to norml.org/act, at the very top of the page are all of the federal action alerts that are currently going on. So for anybody who's watching right now, go click on that link. You'll see it in the description of this live stream, and that'll take you there, and you can participate for the ones having to do with MORE. And then I believe that Schumer's bill is going to drop sometime around April 20th is what he was talking about. So I'm seeing a lot of people also asking about Mace's bill. Do you have a brief update on that, or just like what is the most recent that has happened with that one?
Well, right Representative Mace is still in discussions with members of the Democratic Party about getting additional co-sponsors. So it's in a bit of a holding pattern right now until after the Moore vote takes place. Considering the potential reality that control of Congress in one or both chambers might flip, the States Reform Act might be the piece of legislation that we start to see move through the chambers next year. But for the time being, Moore is really where the focus is. And we're very hopeful that we'll be able to get Representative Mace to co-sponsor the Moore Act in order to show solidarity with the other lawmakers on both sides of the aisle that are supporting this legislation in order to make sure that it passes and, as I mentioned earlier, maintain momentum and keep this issue at top of mind for both lawmakers as well as for their constituents.
Awesome. So sounds like Moore Act is our #1 priority right now, making sure that we're reaching out to our legislators so that they know that we support it, so that they vote in favor of it. A lot of people are saying, Morgan, look into your crystal ball. Tell us, will it pass? I mean, I know we have to put in the work to get it done, but how does it look right now on the votes, and where do we need to gain more votes?
It looks really good right now. That being said, because it's a midterm election, it's possible that moderate Democrats might get scared, or particularly those who are facing reelection in this cycle. So it's really important to make sure that they know that their constituents support this. And it's also very useful if we try to get as many moderate Republicans on board as possible as well. Or even some of those that are a little bit farther out of the moderate stream. We want to make this bill as bipartisan as possible, and particularly any lawmakers, no matter what side of the aisle they're on, if they look at the polling, this is something that has majority support, regardless of political party, and particularly among younger voters that are going to be in charge of putting these people into office again in the near future. So, from a political standpoint, it makes absolute sense to back this legislation, no matter what party you're a member of, and no matter what other, cannabis policies you might support. This will be an excellent tool for us making further steps towards ending prohibition in the very near future.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that there's good support, but it never hurts to get more people on board. Don't take it for granted. But also pushing to get more conservatives signed on to the Moore Act, if we need to pivot over to the Mace Act, should probably make that even easier, I would hope, right?
Absolutely. And I think that it would be a show of good faith between the parties that they can support each other's legalization bills.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I know that you're busy, Morgan, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to close it out with anything else that you want to make sure that we touched on today.
No, just want to reiterate, please contact your lawmakers at the page that Jax mentioned, or directly through any number of means. You can usually just go to their websites and find their contact information. Even if you can't talk to them, you can talk to a staffer, and those messages do filter up the chain. So please make sure to do that. I mean, now is not the time to let off the gas.
Right, and those staffers are logging people who are for and against legislation. So no matter who you talk to, it is going to get logged, and that will be looked at whenever they're making their decision on how they're going to vote. So thank you for joining us today, Morgan. I'm going to pivot over to the state update now. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And just one final note, one of the only reasons that we're getting a vote on this as soon as we are is because of the tireless efforts of our supporters actually reaching out to their members of Congress to make this happen. So just want to express my gratitude and let you know that your efforts are making a difference.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan. Hopefully we'll have you on again soon to give us another update. You have a good day.
You too.
Bye. All right, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and pivot over to talking about state policy, because not only have we had a lot going on at the federal level, we've had a lot going on at the state level. Crossover dates have happened in many states, so now we kind of have a better idea of what legislation is going to be advancing and moving forward. And I've also got some ballot initiative updates for y'all today. Normally, I like to ask you guys to drop what state you're in the comments, so that at the end I can go back and see if I might have any updates for you guys. So make sure that if you are tuning in live, that you drop where you're from in the comments. I see Alabama NORML is watching today, and Lehigh Valley NORML. Hi, friends. Thank you for joining us. Let's go ahead and kick it off right away with the news that is coming in from out of New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is going to be our first highlight of the day. There's legislation called House Bill 1598, and it would legalize the use and possession of cannabis by adults age 21 and older. This is a great, move forward for New Hampshire. However, this legislation would only make cannabis available at retail state-owned stores. This would greatly limit participation in the market, and it likely runs afoul of federal law. So the update on this legislation is that the committee narrowly voted to approve this legislation 12-10 with some amendments. So the bill now heads for the House floor. It's extremely important that you reach out to your legislator in support of legal cannabis, but also with a request to amend this effort so that we don't have the issue with the federal law. There are some ways that we can get around the state-owned stores and empower people to have boutique or like draft beer, brewery type licensing. So make sure if you're in New Hampshire that you reach out about House Bill 1598. Next, I want to talk about Minnesota. Legislation is currently pending. It's two different bills, so these are called companion bills. We've got House Bill 1355 and its companion Senate Bill 2348, and it would reduce penalties for the limited possession of non-flower cannabis products and streamline the expungement process for cannabis-related offenses. So Minnesota decriminalized flower back in the 1970s, but popular forms of THC such as edibles and concentrates remain criminalized. So this bill would authorize the expungement of felony records for marijuana offenses if the charge would not maintain a felony classification after the passage of this bill. It would also provide for automatic expunction of lower-level cannabis offenses and restore the Second Amendment rights for those with personal cannabis convictions. So the House bill is the one that is currently moving, and House Bill 1355 was heard this past Wednesday and voted out of committee 13-3. So make sure if you live in Minnesota that you send a message to your lawmaker in support of this effort. Additionally, I've got some information here for Louisiana. I'm going to highlight one bill today, but I do want to let anyone who's watching from Louisiana know that I will have more updates on more bills for you next week. I just don't have all of the actions prepared for you today, but you will see emails from me likely on Monday regarding a full docket of actions that you can take. Now, the reason that I wanted to make sure and get this legislation on for today, even though I was hustling right at the last minute getting into the update, is that this is legislation that NORML opposes. So current law in Louisiana has partially decriminalized or reduced the penalties for cannabis for those that are 21 years of age and older. So it still maintains a penalty of a $100 fine if it's under 14 grams, it does carry no threat of jail time. But this bill in Louisiana, House Bill 700, seeks to provide penalties for the possession of cannabis by individuals under 18. And it is NORML's opinion that young people in particular, should not be saddled with a criminal record and the lifelong penalties and stigma that are associated with it. So I want to make sure that if you are from Louisiana, that you click today and make sure that you participate in this opposition effort to this legislation. So before I go on to a few more items I want to touch on, I'm going to come over to the comments, see if I see any questions real quick. We've got South Carolina in the house, Kansas, Florida, people from Louisiana. Good, you just got my update. Colorado, Minnesota, so you guys heard what's going on. I see someone from Nebraska. I'll be highlighting something about your ballot initiative momentarily. We've got South Dakota, Missouri. So for a lot of these states, there are actions currently happening. If you go to norml.org/act and you scroll down to the dynamic map, you can hover over your state and it'll show you all of the currently moving legislation. I saw someone just click in from Maryland, and I'm glad to see that you got all of your convictions expunged. There is legislation currently moving in Maryland that will create a referendum and an outlying structure for an adult use market in that state. So I encourage you to participate in that legislation. All right, Pivoting back to our updates, next I want to talk about Tennessee. So Tennessee allows for the use of cannabis extracts that are high in CBD and low in THC in instances where a physician has recommended such treatment to a patient and they have a state qualifying condition. So there are several bills, 4 different bills that address medical cannabis. No, there are 2 bills that are moving in particular. HB 1747 and its companion bill would add quadriplegia as a qualifying condition. And then House Bill 2641 would establish a medical program under a purview of the Medical Cannabis Commission, including a registry for patients, authorizing possession of certain medical cannabis products for patients and their designated caregivers. And it also redefines the term marijuana to exclude any products containing less than 0.9% delta-9 THC. So both of these bills will be heard next week in the House Health Subcommittee in Tennessee. The legislation 1747 and 264 will be heard on March the 30th, and one of the companion bills, Senate Bill 2532, will be heard in the Senate Judiciary Committee on the 29th. So if you are in Tennessee, I encourage you to get involved in these efforts and make sure that we can expand access in your state. Next, let's talk about South Carolina. I know I saw someone in the comments from South Carolina. You probably have already been watching Senate Bill 150, the Compassionate Care Act, which would allow qualifying patients to use, purchase, and possess medical cannabis with a physician's recommendation. The bill passed the Senate and now has been assigned to the House's Medical, Military, Public, and Municipal Affairs Committee. Whew, that is a mouthful for a committee name. And it is awaiting a hearing there. There's only a few weeks left in session, so it's imperative that this bill moves soon. So if you live in South Carolina, there's a link there for you to contact these committee members and ask them to vote Senate Bill 150 out of committee and to the House floor as soon as possible. So next I want to talk about some legislation that is moving in Maine. So Maine Legislative Document 1928 will streamline the state's medical access program and limits the actions of law enforcement can take against registered cardholders. In the most recent work session, this bill was voted ought to pass by the overwhelming majority of the committee with strong bipartisan support. It is the author's request that you send a message if you live in Maine, thanking these committee members for their support on this cannabis legislation. Additionally, I want to point out in Illinois, House Bill 4116 protects cannabis consumers from employment discrimination. It mandates that an employer may not refuse to hire an individual or discipline an employee solely because of a positive marijuana test. HB 4116 passed the House with a vote of 61 to 41, and it has now been assigned to the Senate Executive Committee. It is the author's request that you send a message to your lawmaker if you live in Illinois, asking them to support this legislation as it moves through the chambers. So next I want to pivot over talking about some of our ballot initiatives that are moving across the country. So this is an update, some need to act. There is a need to act in Nebraska and an update, excuse me, in Arkansas. So in Nebraska, there's an organization called Nebraskans for Medical Marijuana, and they have issued an urgent plea for volunteers and donors due to a personal and tragic circumstance that has left one of their most committed donors no longer able to fund its petition drive this year. So the petition drive is for 2 different medical cannabis initiatives. The Medical Cannabis Patient Protection Act would protect patients with serious health conditions and their caregivers from arrest for the use of medical cannabis as recommended by a healthcare provider. And the Medical Cannabis Commission Act regulates private businesses that provide medical cannabis for qualified patients. It is the organization's request that you look into volunteer opportunities and check out their map of signing locations so that you can help them continue this effort, even though there has been this extremely important loss on their side of being able to have the robust funds they were expecting. But the state senator, Adam Moorfield, a Democrat out of Lincoln, is the leader of the petition drive. And he says, our campaign has an incredible amount of grassroots support. We have hundreds of well-organized volunteers who are out gathering signatures, and more supporters sign up every day to help. So please make sure that you are one of these supporters signing up to help. And if you've not already signed the petition, make sure that you go check out the map of signing locations and please sign today. There is a large signature requirement that will be due quite soon, and so it's extremely important that we make this push forward. So now a quick update in Arkansas. So Arkansans for Compassionate Care have withdrawn their current ballot initiative proposal in the hopes of submitting a new proposal that will allow them to have more time to get the signatures that they need. Of course, we know there's lots of interesting time deadlines on these ballot initiatives. So if you are in Arkansas, make sure that you're engaging. There are several different ballot initiative efforts in that state. This is one of, I believe, 3 that we're giving you an update on today. So those are my updates. That's what I got for you guys today. But I'm going to come back to the comments real quick, and I'm going to check and see if there's any questions or any states that maybe I didn't highlight that we could talk about real quick. All right, so let's come over here. So in Alabama, I did see Alabama NORML is here. Of course, we have a decrim bill, SB 160, that you'll be able to find an action alert on. That is one of our priority bits of legislation, and we hope that you will participate in. And then I also know that we saw Pennsylvania in here. Let me scroll down this massive sheet. Pennsylvania has quite a few bits of legislation moving. Of course, everyone's probably been watching Senator Regan's hearings having to do with legalization, but there is also legislation about allowing for home grow, decriminalization, addressing DUID, and other items such as that. So if you are in Pennsylvania, make sure that you go to not TexasNormal.org. That's my website for Texas NORML. Go to normal.org/act, and there you will find actions for Pennsylvania. All right, so coming back over here, let's talk about, I see Kansas here. Let's scroll back up to Kansas. It looks like in Kansas, SB 560 is the last one moving. However, deadlines are quickly approaching, and if it doesn't advance quickly, that bill will be dead. So please make sure you participate there. I also see South Carolina. So scrolling down to South Carolina. Oh, wait, no, we went over that. S150, you have a medical bill that you can be working on. Now let's see about Florida in the comments. You guys are asking. So Florida has reached its crossover date, and currently its legislative session as it pertains to cannabis has finished. So that is no longer happening in Florida. We talked about Louisiana. Let's see, we talked about Minnesota and Nebraska. Let's see, South Dakota. I know that in South Dakota, some bills have recently been signed, and I believe that there's a few pending signature. Yes, so in South Dakota, the governor has signed several bills, and we are still waiting on 1 or 2 left to be signed. So great job in South Dakota. Let's see, Missouri. So Tom was asking about Missouri. So first of all, there's Legal Missouri 22, which is a ballot initiative effort that is going on. But in addition to that, let me scroll. All right. There is a bill having to do with family protections, and that is a priority legislation for us, and that has been voted to pass, and continues on to the next part of the process. So, of course, if you're in Missouri, there are a few bills that you can also support, and also make sure that you support the ballot initiative effort. Those of you in Maryland, I told you about the legalization. Please make sure that you participate in that. All right. I think that I have addressed all of the questions and states that are mentioned in the comments here that I see. So on a closing note, I just want to remind everyone that in the description, you'll see the most recent federal update that Morgan touched on at the beginning of our stream here today. You'll also see the link for our state policy update that I posted. And then you'll see information about how you can support NORML's mission. You can become a member, you can become a one-time or monthly donor, but also if you want to get involved in your state, there's a link to find out what chapters are near you so that you can be more intricately involved in making sure that thoughtful cannabis policy is enacted in your state. And lastly, I do want to remind anyone who is a lawyer that we have our Aspen Legal Conference coming up in June, in the beginning of June. So please make sure that you have looked into that so you can get your continuing education credits there. And of course, I did mention to those that are in Louisiana and Oklahoma that I am going to have more updates for you this week. But if you are in Louisiana, or this upcoming week, but if you are in Louisiana, please participate in that action alert for the legislation that we are currently opposing. So on that note, I am going to wish everybody a very happy and lovely Friday. I hope you are in a state where you are able to legally access, and if you're not, I commiserate with you from the great state of Texas. And I will see you guys next Friday, same place, same time, and I look forward to hopefully having some even more updates and great news for you then. So until next week, friends.